Good evening and welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Alex Lord. Tomorrow, big day for baseball fans as the Braves report their pitchers and catchers to spring training. And we're going to give a little preview of the competitions that will take place over the next 6 weeks that every Braves fan should have their eye on. And I think it starts really with the pitchers. The bullpen and the rotation is going to have some fierce competitions. There's not too much to figure out as far as position players go. We'll get into those a little bit later. But I think this bullpen, Alex, is really going to be the most fierce competition of spring training. And I think it's something that could last all the way to the very end.
Well, injuries are inevitable. So Alex Anthopoulos getting, 10 guys that could start, or maybe even more than 10 guys, 12 guys be on a major league roster around the league is very wise. There's already, I don't know how many you would say are locks, but there's like 5 guys who are very comfortable. You could even go 6 guys, depending on how Tyler Matzik comes out of this injury, who are very comfortable in high leverage situations. It's an embarrassment of riches. It's going to be incredibly tough. And outside of the guys who are just, designated relievers, there's guys like Yanoa who could potentially move into a reliever role. Like I said, an embarrassment of riches. It's going to be very stiff competition. Oh, and don't forget about Charlie Culberson might actually carve out a role.
Don't forget about the big Charlie. I mean, you could even talk about Ian Anderson potentially moving in the bullpen at some point. Huascar Yanoa. You can talk about A.J. Smith-Shawver, Hurston Waldrop, particularly later in the year. I don't think they're going to be eager to do that. But, hey, when push comes to shove, as injuries pile up or whatever, those are definitely going to be options later in the year. I don't think they're going to be competing in that role because I think you want to try to make them starters. So that's what they're going to be early in the year, but definitely later in the year, that's something to keep an eye on. You got guys like Ray Kerr, Dasbel Hernandez, who made his MLB debut last year that not a lot of people are thinking about, but definitely. And then Ken Giles. I mean, this guy was an all-star closer 3 or 4 years ago. Yes, he's been dealing with injuries, but he's healthy and he's going to have an opportunity to compete out of camp. You said 6 guys that are comfortable in high leverage situations. By my count, I think it's really more like 9 because listen, we don't know how Tyler Matzik and Dylan Lee are going to look, but those could be your 7th and 8th guys in the bullpen. And they're very comfortable. Ronaldo Lopez, Aaron Bummer, AJ Minter, Pierce Johnson, Joe Jimenez, Raisel Iglesias, all super comfortable in high leverage situations. And then don't forget about Ken Giles. Like I don't know if Ken Giles is going to make it. It may be a little bit of a long shot, but I mean, we're talking about a guy who has been an 8th or 9th inning guy his entire career. If he does somehow win a spot out of spring training, like he's another guy that's comfortable. So really you got 8 or 9 guys with legitimate MLB experience in the 8th or 9th, 7th inning, high leverage situations.
Would anyone be surprised if he did wind up making an impact for the Braves this year? I mean, this feels like the exact move that Alex Anthopoulos does. Signs a former all-star to a minor league pack, real close to the vet men, and it has nothing to do, but it's just a cherry on top. It's not going to really impact the Braves bullpen, whether it doesn't work out. But if it does work out, Alex Anthopoulos again looks like he just found a diamond in the rough. I mean, would anyone be surprised? Nobody should be surprised anymore if this guy works out.
No, I mean, I would honestly be more surprised if a guy like Ray Kerr, Ken Giles, some of these guys that not a lot of people are talking about don't pan out. Because, I mean, if you look at the track record of Alex Anthopoulos and these kind of signing, it's elite, just like he's elite in every other area. He finds these guys that nobody really wants. He sees their upside, sees their potential. I mean, just think back to 4 years ago, Tyler Matzik. This was a guy that was pitching an independent ball, and now has one of the most iconic moments in Braves franchise history and was a dominant reliever before going under the knife with Tommy John surgery. So I'm interested to see how guys like Matzik and guys like Dylan Lee and even Huascar Yanoa, who are coming off huge injuries, how they can bounce back and what they look like. We'll get a glimpse of that in spring training. I don't think any 3 should be shoo-ins to earning a spot because, like we said, the Braves have a lot of arms, and it's going to be intriguing to see how those guys look because you can never take anything for granted as far as injuries and how these guys are going to bounce back. But they could potentially be, high-end relievers for the Braves.
Yeah, I mean, injuries are inevitable, and I think that if anyone knows that, Alex Anthopoulos knows that every single year he's been a GM of the Braves, they've had struggles with the pitching staff, whether it be the relief corps at times or the starting rotation at times, injuries, maybe deals not panning out like he had hoped. There's countless examples. And I think that You saw what he did, and it's not just the bullpen. The starting rotation has an equal amount of competition. Obviously, there's kind of 4 starters set in stone, but there's a ton of competition for that 5th spot. And I think that you kind of saw Alex Anthopoulos' approach materialize of like, I'm going to overkill this pitching staff. I'm going to overkill it. I'm not going to let it be a problem. He didn't have to address the position players that much. Obviously, he got Kelenic, which could be, a godsend here in a little bit because he's under contract for 5 more seasons. It was clear his approach to the offseason was about just trying to make the pitching staff as bulletproof as possible. It'll never be bulletproof because of the pitch clock. Injuries are inevitable and things like that, but he got pretty damn close, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a guy in Bryce Elder that's, I would say, the favorite to get that spot out of spring training. But this guy was an NL All-Star, and you're talking about him competing for a spot in the rotation. AJ Smith-Shawver obviously is going to have an opportunity to make a lasting impact if he can come out there and start firing on all cylinders in spring training. Hurston Waldrop is a name to keep an eye on. Even Huascar, I mean, that's a lottery ticket. I know he's 25 years old, coming off a significant injury, but this was a guy that was in the rotation just a couple of years ago.
Everybody was talking about him as like he was going to be a focal point in the rotation.
Yeah, I mean, when you can throw it 100 miles per hour with a wipeout slider and rack up strikeouts the way that it can, obviously the upside is there. And listen, Tommy John is obviously a significant injury, but it's not a death wish in a player's career. I've said it a million times. You'd rather have a guy go under the knife, miss 18 months with Tommy John. Sometimes they come back even better than deal with a shoulder injury or stuff that you saw with, Kyle Wright and stuff like that. And obviously he's no longer with the organization after being a top 10 finisher in the NL Cy Young race just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and a couple more guys that, they're not going to be frontline guys, but as you saw with Bryce Elder last year, injuries are inevitable. You never know where that key cog is going to come in or where he's going to fit in. Alan Winans is a guy that maybe keep an eye on him. Ian Anderson, midway through the season, he's supposed to return sometime in the summer, I believe. So there's just I'm going to continue to say it, the embarrassment of riches that Brian Snitker has at his disposal, that Alex Anthopoulos has given him, is second to none. It's not only, like we said, like the high leverage guys in the bullpen or the aces in the rotation. It's the depth in each facet of the pitching staff for the Braves. It's crazy. It's unfathomable. So when it inevitably does come that somebody goes down for, whether it's a 60-day IL stint or whatever, somebody is going to have to step up. And I think Alex Anthopoulos has positioned himself to kind of fill whatever void might come. Like if it's a frontline guy like Max Fried, obviously that's terrible. If it's a guy like AJ Minter, obviously that's terrible. But it feels like there's solid depth across the board. Across the board, there's just immense depth.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't even mention Darius Vines. He's another guy, another young pitcher to keep an eye on. Ronaldo Lopez, I'm interested to see how the Braves want to utilize him. They talked about stretching him out going into spring training. I'm interested to see now that they added Chris Sale, if that's still a possibility. To me, I view Lopez as a guy that maybe can go multiple innings out of the bullpen, hums it. He's had a lot more success in the bullpen, but it's definitely something, when you have a guy that has that good of stuff, and he has the potential and he's been a starter before, it's definitely something to experiment with because if he does figure it out as a starter, you're talking about a guy that's your 5th starter that has some of the best stuff in all of baseball. So I'm very intrigued to see how they use him in spring training, and he could potentially be an option to win that 5th starter job that we're not even really considering right now.
Yeah, and versatility is never a bad thing. Like, and more importantly, in the regular season, it's not going to matter that much. But when you get to October, and this is what I've been harping on, Alex Anthopoulos has done a marvelous job, is somebody like Ronaldo Lopez, who the Braves, maybe a starter doesn't get as far into the game as, Braves fans, Brian Snitker, Alex Anthopoulos expects. A guy like Ronaldo Lopez who can come in and in a pinch, get you 2-3 more innings is invaluable in the postseason. And frankly, it's something the Braves have kind of missed the past couple of postseasons.
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. I do want to briefly touch on the left field situation because right now Kelenic is really the only starting caliber outfielder that they have, or left fielder that they have on the roster. And I've said several times leading up to the season that I expect that to change. I do expect them to sign someone in the next coming weeks. So look out for that as a possibility. And I think it's going to be someone that that is capable, think Kevin Pillar, of starting in a pinch like we saw last year in place of Eddie Rosario, because they don't really have a 4th outfielder, at least that I'm looking at right now on the 40-man roster, when you're talking about Eli White, Jordan Luplow, JP Martinez, none of those guys really I would go into the season trusting. And when you talk about a guy in Alex Anthopoulos who really doesn't leave a lot of stones unturned, he's going to make sure they have the best 40-man roster, let alone the best 26-man roster possible. So I really expect them. Maybe it's someone that gets released during spring training. Maybe it's someone that hasn't been signed yet and is currently a free agent, to add another outfielder to just push Kelenic a little bit. And I think that will help Kelenic as well.
I think there's no harm in adding a little bit of an insurance policy, but it's very clear that the Braves expect him to not only seize the role, but to kind of, realize his full potential and what he wasn't able to do in Seattle or New York. And I think that, they're right to think so. When is Alex Anthopoulos is so good at this specific thing of kind of realizing a situation where a guy, can come to Atlanta. And I think you've heard plenty of people say, this is not the first, I'm not the first person to say it, that, Kelenic felt like he was pressing a little bit in Seattle. Like he was expected to be the guy. Here, he very well could be batting ninth. You're not expected to be the guy. You're hardly expected to be a guy. Just go out there and be yourself. And I think that's going to do wonders for his development. Obviously, the actual coaching staff of the Atlanta Braves, squeeze more out of just about talent than anyone. So I think, the plan is very clear. It's for Kelenic to be the starter. Though I don't think the insurance policy is really ever a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, they need another fourth outfielder. And I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that they know whoever, like if you're talking about a guy like Adam Duvall, he probably wants to be a starter. Now, I'm just bringing up a name like that. Those kind of guys are probably waiting out the market to see if they can become starters. That's not going to happen in Atlanta, and that's why it's taking a little bit longer to get one of those guys in. Coming up after the break, NFL power rankings are not fond of the Falcons. Is that fair leading into the 2024 season?